Hi, and welcome to this IFS therapy video series. I'm Stephanie Mitchell. I'm a level 3 trained IFS practitioner, psychotherapist, and group therapist in private practice in Adelaide, South Australia. In this video series, I'm speaking with Dr. Richard Schwartz and Michelle Glass about what makes IFS unique from other therapy models and how we might keep the fidelity of the model given its significant growth in popularity in the trauma field and beyond in recent years. I'm particularly interested in helping people new to the model to get a better grasp of the nuances of IFS, both as clients and as therapists. So let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Richard Schwartz is a developer of the internal family systems therapy model. And the thing I admire most about Richard, who is informally known of as Dick, is just how far he was willing to go in order to really listen to his clients about what brings healing. He would say that he allowed them to teach him this model as he sat listening to their inner worlds. And my second guest is Michelle Glass. She is a certified IFS practitioner who's been using IFS for over 15 years, and her main teacher has been Dick, who she has over 350 hours with. She's also the author of the book Daily Parts Meditation Practice, a journey of embodied integration for clients and therapists, which has been really well received. And she's well known as the editor for the Foundation for Self-Leadership's magazine Outlook. And the reason I invited Michelle onto this video series is I know of her passion for using IFS not just as a therapeutic tool, but in her daily life as a real way of life and a way of being with her own experience and finding a path of healing after significant childhood trauma. So let's jump into this first conversation. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I'm pretty excited. And yeah. So we're just going to have a conversation just to set this up for all the listeners and for people watching. We're just going to have a conversation about IFS and what makes it different. And maybe just to set that up for everybody, I kind of approached Dick because I was interested in, like as this IFS explodes around the globe, how do we help people come along as best we can? When it was just sort of like a few therapists and you had a lot of contact with them, it was maybe easier to people to find their way. I know that I felt that I really got the model once I went to level 3 with you. And so I sort of was thinking, well, maybe there's a whole bunch of things that could be added as a resource around, there's more to the model than just the kind of things you learn in training, the process. Yeah. Just the IFS sort of process or steps or protocol or whatever you want to call it. There's this thing called being in self, but then there's like, what does that mean? Or how does that look? And then there's kind of like in my mind, and I don't know, did you get to see the slide I shared?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. I've sort of broken it down into 3 kind of columns around there's sort of like the self of the therapist and what that means when you've done your own work and you're coming from self. And then there's sort of like the process of being with the client and this attunement that happens. It's very, very, I don't know what the word is. I've had a lot of therapy and I've not experienced that in other therapies, that level of attunement that happens. And then there's kind of the steps that we learn.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in how we talk about all of that. Yeah. So I'm happy to pop that slide and do a slide share. I've got it here on the screen if you'd like to see it.
Sure.
But maybe we could just start the conversation for now on what you hear in that and how that is.
Well, I appreciate the conversation because I share your concern as things spread so quickly. And, I worry, like you, that people will get this in a superficial way. And I do a handful of level 3s through the year, but there are lots and lots of people that won't have any contact with me. And so that remains a big concern. And, I think one of the things that would probably help as we go through is for you, Stephanie, to talk about what you got that made you see things differently from
Mhm.
level 3. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I haven't thought about that question. Um, uh, Let me muse on that. Sorry, I'm going to
Okay.
have to come back around. Or maybe just off the top of my head, I think I've watched a lot of your videos, demo videos, that you can, excuse me, buy from CSL or when I've been part of trainings and on continuity program. And there is something, I suppose I've never understood how quickly you go. That's not something I'm like, how is he doing that? That is so quick, you know? And I suppose I felt that there's some sense of, is this just because you work with therapists and all these demos are with therapists and therefore these people are primed for the work and it just is like, bam, there it is. Okay, wow. And so I was really, what I liked about the level 3 was there's a bunch of things. One was that there was a lot of hanging out, what I call hanging out with protectors.
Mhm.
And so I really got to see a couple more things. I got to see a lot of attunement, a lot of slowing down, a lot of, there was this moment with one person where there was, the person was very quiet, but their body was doing something. And it was with a protector who was kind of saying, I don't want to go near anything. And you had kind of said, is this part doing that to your body? And she kind of nodded and you said, just let it do that. Just stay with that. And I think these are the things that are not in the demos. They're not necessarily in other trainings. And so I suppose for me, it was partly seeing you work in more than just the things we get to watch on unburdening videos. Okay.
Mhm.
And then there was other things like there was questions. Someone at one point asked you, why do you just keep asking the protectors to step back? And
Mhm.
that's something that, to be honest, I found that really irksome when I watched the videos. I'm like, well, hang on a second. I don't understand what's going on. You know, like this is way too quick and you can't just keep asking parts to step back, you know, like you need to hear their concerns. And then you had said an answer and I wish that I could remember exactly your words because my whole system just went, oh, now I get it. I totally get it. But it was something along the lines, and you can elaborate. Maybe actually I don't even have to try and remember. You can say what you would say to that question.
No, do tell me what you do remember.
Um, my memory was something like, oh, I just find that these protectors, you know, sometimes they're just willing to step back and you didn't say the next bit, but I make a meaning of almost like they've been heard now. So
Mhm.
they've been heard and acknowledged, they can step back. And then you sort of said, and so that's the first thing we ask. And then if that doesn't work, of course we listen.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's a stepping off point because I know it's different in some of the level 1 trainings where you're encouraged to spend a lot more time with protectors before you ask them to step back.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a bit of a complex issue because a lot of your success in getting protectors to step back is related to how much self you bring as a therapist.
Yeah.
So in the in the beginning, you're kind of insecure with the models, so you're not going to bring nearly the kind of self that I bring. And so protectors won't step back unless you schmooze with them for a long time sometimes. Whereas on the other hand, if you bring a lot of self, especially confidence, that's the word confidence, and they sense the authenticity of it, and they sense that you really do know inner systems, you really do know how to operate in there, and you can make promises that they sense that you'll pull off, then protectors will step back pretty readily, even in systems that are very, very protected. And then spending all the time getting to know protectors in the same way is a kind of waste of time because before you've healed the exiles they protect, a lot of what they say is quite extreme and is designed to distract and keep you away from those places. Then after you've healed the exile, you come back to them, and it's a much more straight conversation and much more productive conversation. So now that I bring a lot of self-energy, my general approach is simply to first ask the protectors. I mean, once I've negotiated permission, which I can get pretty quickly now because I come with a lot of confidence and a lot of, I can quickly address the common concerns protectors have, which I really encourage people to memorize the answers to their concerns. So in many cases, I can get permission quickly. And, in doing that, I am talking to the protectors. Then once I have permission, we're headed toward an exile. Mainly, I'm just asking parts to step back first. If they won't, then I'll talk to them and see why they won't and address their fears if it comes to that. But the metaphor, I don't know, it's not a metaphor. The way I think about it is these protectors are a bunch of kids. They're young in general. And some of them, seem adult-like, or they seem very smart or resistant in a big way, in a grown-up way. But they're not. They're just a bunch of scared kids at heart. And if an adult shows up and says, I've got this, they'll resist at first, but if they actually believe you got it and you can do it, they'll kind of gladly give you a chance, and they'll, you negotiate, they'll watch and see. But that's the way I think about it when I'm entering these kinds of systems. They just want to check me out to be sure I can pull it off. But once they do, it's not that hard a lot of the time to get them to trust and give us the space to do the work.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I found from the level 3 was that there was a sense of, on the demo, the videos, I can't feel your energy there. And when I'm with you in the room, I was just like, wow, I just felt you with that person. I felt you so there. And I was there with that person, and so there's a felt sense, like you said, of your self-energy, you're being with the person, and nothing you did, like when I'm watching the demos and it's kind of like in this removed state on a video, it's kind of like, how did you decide to go there? When I was in the room, it was like everything you did made complete sense. I was like, oh my God, that was genius. That was exactly right. I know this person a little now. We've been in the trainings together. And but also just to talk, and I want to invite Michelle to make a comment in a second, but just one of the things you mentioned, and I was just flagging in my mind, is about when these protectors who are like a bunch of little kids and they're frightened, and then, like this parent or this adult comes in and sort of is saying, I'm here and it's okay, guys, and I'm really confident about this. I think that's, in my mind, why we don't need things like grounding techniques and all these other things. And I think maybe that's what's lost when people start talking about that. They're not realizing that it's not a technique that they're learning. It's something about, the reason that we don't need the grounding techniques, and we go in and we say to protectors, like, okay, I'm here and we're going to work through this and it's okay. That is maybe what's people are getting lost around, thinking they have to put IFS with something because it's not enough. So that was just in my mind. And anyway, I want to pause, and Michelle, I would like to invite a comment.
Sure. I'm not sure what really speaks to me other than hearing you speak about the difference between a video and then being there in the room. And even before you finally made that comment about you could feel Dick's energy or the energy of the room, that's something that we get, that we don't get from a video. We certainly get it in, we can get it in trainings by watching the demos, right? But so I think there's a lot to be said, even maybe in unpacking that, and you talking about what does it mean to be in self, and kind of beginning to get to feel what that is, feeling what self is in the body, and how operating from that place is a lot different than, you know, up in the head and from our manager parts. So
and speaking of that, you know, going back to what you were saying about grounding skills, I think it takes a long time for people to really believe that self is as great as it is. And especially people that have come out of other trauma systems where there's such an emphasis on the fragility of the client and the sort of terror about, you know, about re-traumatizing them by having them get overwhelmed by exiles. And the focus on what's called the window of tolerance. And what I learned gradually over the years is that self has an enormous window of tolerance. And that's the big difference between IFS and those other approaches. So that as a client is approaching an exile, if there's enough self, if I really have a sense that self is there, even though they look overwhelmed, I'm not going to worry about it because I know self can handle most anything. And then the downside, of course, with the skills, the grounding skills, is that you give the message to the part that it needs to leave, that it doesn't belong, or that it's too scary. And that's the opposite message of what we're trying to give. So when somebody's having a panic attack, I basically am saying, it's so great you're here. I'm really glad you finally made it. I see you're terrified. And I expect you're stuck in a really scary place and where bad things are happening. But we're going to get you out of there and we're going to help you. And it'll be easier to help you if you wouldn't mind separating your energy from this person so they can help you too. And right away, boom, the client's grounded. So we have our own way of grounding people. It's not that we don't have grounding skills, quote unquote. It's that ours don't involve any of the typical things that people talk about. Instead, simply involve welcoming the part and then ask you to separate. And again, if you don't also trust that parts can control how much they overwhelm, then you're going to have to resort to these other techniques. And that was a discovery I made many, many years ago that has held up really well over all these years, that if a part trusts that it's in its best interest to not overwhelm, it won't. Mm-hmm. Or a part who is seeming to overwhelm, if it trusts that it's in its best interest, it will pull its energy out. And so we go to direct access and we talk to the part about how it'll be easier if you wouldn't mind totally blending. And to pull that off, and you got to believe that that's a possibility. Mm-hmm. And so many people come to IFS with the opposite belief, that these emotions are uncontrollable, and that's why you have to be so careful about them. So anyway, that's my soapbox talk about grounding skills.
Yeah, well, I love it. And, you know, I have the same soapbox. I have a lot more words to my soapbox. I can go on a real rant. I think, you know, there's a couple of things that you said. One is, you know, when we come to someone, the part has something really important to say. And I think even before I found IFS, you know, my system can be really intense and flood a lot. And when I've been in my own therapy, I have, you know, really found it irksome that a therapist wants to calm me down when it's kind of like, no, I have a legitimate reason to be very, very angry or hurt or upset or crying. Don't tell me I'm at some up tolerance. I'm actually managing. I manage it every day without you. So, you know, don't be telling me this is now too much for me. I get to decide that. And so I suppose when I came as a therapist and people would come in and see me, I was just always really interested in the part that, yeah, as you say, panics, or the part who wants to cut even though another part hates that. And so I suppose what I'm interested in is there's something about when we've been taught for so long that somehow it's our responsibility as the therapist to manage this thing. The client's coming in saying, I don't like having panic attacks. And somehow it's our job to make that stop, or it's help them, or, yeah. And I kind of almost like the analogy of a child where it's like, you know, if a child really badly hurts themselves, and they come running to the mother because they're hurt, the mother doesn't go, okay, take a breath, calm down, okay, it's, you know, like, let's have some tapping techniques to get through this, or whatever. The mother hugs the child and says, you know, it's okay. I can see you're really hurt. That's really scary because it hurts so much, you know. I'm right here. And so I kind of feel like there's a sense of, like you were talking about, believing it, the confidence of it, and I mean, the other element to it is this sense of the part can choose not to flood. But I think there's something very down-regulating in just also knowing that the therapist is there. And I'll just to mention, so I work with Michelle, just for the people watching the video, I work with Michelle. She's my IFS practitioner. And I remember one time, I had parts doing the whole like, okay, we're going to tell you all the scary things. And I texted her between session because I was like, yeah, okay, I'm completely flooded with terror. I don't know what to do. And really my story is that I'm too much. And that, you know, like I had read all the books on IFS and I was thinking, great, this is going to be the thing. And I'm just going to ask these parts not to flood, and they won't, and it would be great. And then this happened and I was like, right, Michelle's going to freak out, I'm too much, you know. And just to have her text back and say, I'm fine, you know, like I'm right here, I'm not worried, we can just remind these parts to step back. I was just like, oh, thank God, just my whole system just settled. So I think there's something to be said for that, the steadiness of the therapist, like you said, believing in it.
Yeah, it's the steadiness, and it's also, you know, we have these 5 Ps, one of which is perspective, which is really the IFS perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of thinking, oh my God, she's having a panic attack, or oh my God, she's, you know, getting suicidal, or she's going to go cut now, oh my God, I've got to keep that from happening. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, some parts are blending now. And I just, you know, it'll help your whole system if I can stay in self and convey that it's all okay, that you don't have to panic because these parts are blending. And so that perspective is crucial, because if you buy into the more pathological views of what's happening, then you as a therapist are going to panic too. And then your managers are going to start to manage. And that's what sounds like has happened to you in other therapies.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, you know, there's 2 things I'm hearing. One is this like a perspective and the self of the therapist. And then the second part is the invitation to not flood, which is another section, I think. But again, I'm just checking. Michelle, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I want to add at this point is that I feel really fortunate that I wasn't trained beyond my undergraduate degree in psychology. I wasn't trained in the pathology, and coming at this as a practitioner, I don't have, I guess, some of what a lot of therapists have to work with their parts around these notions that were just discussed. So, and coming at this, for me, having been an IFS client for many years, I know it internally and externally. So there is that high degree of trust in the model and of self. And so it's easy for me to come and bring that. And I see with friends and colleagues who are struggling with that. And so I just wanted to say, for me, I guess I'm blessed with not having to had to work through that piece of it.
I think that's a good point, Michelle. I don't think people really trust what I'm saying. that,
Yep.
that parts are not pathology, that parts can control how much they overwhelm, that self can handle most anything until they've actually experienced it themselves. And so it's those people who know it in their bones and don't flinch and can stay through most anything.
Yeah, I think that is just so important. I get a little bit discouraged that, like, how much work is enough? People, we say do your own work, but I have this thing about being, I have sort of like, my understanding of something is like being with my experience. Fully being with my experience is the thing that allows me to fully be with someone else's experience. And so, to do the work is sort of like not just to dabble. I hear some therapists, I know it's a new context in Australia, so we're all pretty fresh to the model and finding our way, but I hear some therapists in Australia who are sort of saying, oh yeah, I'm doing my work, and it's like they've done a few sessions, or oh yeah, I kind of see that person when I need to. And I suppose for me, doing the work means really, like getting to know my internal system in a really, really deep way, healing my, wounds, and I've got an extra impetus to do that because I have a lot of, trauma. So some days it's really difficult. So I'm pretty committed to that because of my own experiences. But yeah, that's probably another one of my soapboxes is, like you can only take someone as far as you yourself have been, kind of thing.
Yeah. There are a couple of laws of inner physics that I like to quote at a time like this. One is, you will react to someone who's acting like one of your parts or resembles one of your parts in the same way you react to that part. So if you're afraid of your own exiles, then when your client gets very vulnerable and starts to cry, it'll trigger those exiles, which will then trigger your protectors, and you'll not be able to stay present. So something negative will happen. Or if you're afraid of your own anger, then when your client's angry, you're gonna, and so on and so on. So all of that is to say that yes, it really is important. And it's important to let your clients be your tormentors, with a hyphen between the tor and the mentor. So by triggering all this in us, then we now know what we need to heal. And so we can be grateful to them. I'm a totally different person because I let my clients trigger me, and then I followed through and worked with those triggers with somebody. So yeah, all of that is crucial, and it's also true that different people have different levels of trauma and different degree of intensity of exiles, and so not everybody needs long-term IFS therapy as a therapist to be able to do it, but you need to get at least enough that you really buy some of these principles, that you know it inside, so that, when we talk about whether to integrate IFS with what things other people are doing, what I see happen a lot of the time is the therapist will start out in IFS, and then they'll reach some kind of impasse because the part is being stubborn. And then they'll shift to their old model and try the other way. And it may or may not work, but if they had stayed with IFS, sometimes these protectors just need more time. They need to sniff you out more. And when you abandon and go to something else, then that can set the system back in terms of trust. So I can't remember how I got on that, but yeah, I just would love to somehow raise the threshold for IFS therapists so that they stay longer and try to use IFS for a longer time and not bail quite so quickly.
Yeah, and I think one of the things for me is, like I have been frustrated with the model because I'm like, I can't figure out how to do this, And the thing that's kept me is that it's been so life-changing for me personally. So I've been willing to sort of go through the, like, okay, I'm trying to find my way, and find the sort of the nuance outside what I'd been taught in the protocol. I kind of, I knew how Michelle did it. I saw lots of demos with Dick, like, and just then there was this protocol, and how do I, what does that look like in my work, and just staying with it long enough. And I think for me, the things that shifted were when I realized, there's a lot more hanging out with, like, after level 3, I just slowed right down. Stop working so hard. Stop trying to do the model. That's what happened for me, is I just was like, okay, here's the model. I learned that. I know that pretty well now. I'm just going to slow down and be here more.
Yeah. And that's a tough one, because my translation is that you learned it and then your managers tried to implement it.
Yeah.
Right.
And the irony of that is that you might even implement it perfectly according to the protocol, but because you're doing it from managers or self-like parts, it's not having the impact that you'd expect, and then they get frustrated and bail. So yeah, that's part of the challenge, is to, even while you're trying to remember things and learn them, just keep checking and make sure you're not doing the therapy from some manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more, like, when you were talking a minute ago, it's like there's a thing where the more work you do for yourself, okay, well, this is what I've found anyway, then before I would notice I would frustrate it at my client, but I didn't know what that was. And now that I'm much more aware of my parts and who gets activated, and then sometimes I don't know. I'm just like, whoa, something's up, and then I go and work on that later. But oftentimes in session, I'm like, oh, hello, I know you, great, thank you for letting me know you're concerned about that. That's okay,
Yeah.
And I think that's where doing our own work. So it's not simply a matter of asking parts to step back. It's also, for me at least, because I used to sort of think I've just got to go, there's a part, he's getting to step back, in the session. But I've actually found that it's been my way in my system is much more sort of almost just acknowledging them, and then they relax. I had a session with a client, and I had this part going, that sounds like a self-like part, over and over in my, it just kept coming. I don't know, I'm not sure, is this self? And I'm like, it's okay, we'll find out. Let's just stay here. Let's just stay here. Let's just stay here. And in the end, we just had this beautiful moment where it was apparent, no, it wasn't, it was self. And the person was just like, oh, that was just the deepest experience I've had so far. And I was like, phew, just that sense of, don't have to have the manager part who wants to jump in and check, like, oh no, are we doing it right? Is this person in enough self? And whatever she was concerned about. So.
Yeah. Yeah. As I look back on my journey, I think I had a couple advantages.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I didn't have an alternative model. So back when I did it, I had assiduously avoided studying sort of the current intrapsychic psychologies, the depth psychologies, because family therapy was very polarized with psychoanalysis back then. And I also, so I was forced to actually listen to what my clients were saying, or their parts were saying, without putting any presumptions on what they were saying, and take them seriously. And then when I would get stuck, I didn't have an alternative method to bail toward. So I had to stay, and I had to rely on my clients. So one breakthrough moment was, I was really stuck. I had no clue what to do with a client. And I just collapsed and I said, I have no idea what to do next. Does anybody in there know anything? about what we should do. And they came up with the exact right thing to do. And ever since then, and that's how I continued to learn the model, because I forever would be getting stuck. And then I'd just say, hey, can you guys help me out here? Somebody knows something about where we are and where we should go and what should happen next. And almost always they would come up with the answer. And, or does somebody know something about what's going on and why this is happening? And they would basically just teach the model to me. So what I am wanting to encourage current IFS people learning IFS is to try that, and you know, don't feel like you've got to know everything about the map and the technique, and or even if you did know everything, you're still going to get quite stuck in different points, and to not bail and instead just to ask for help from inside, both inside yourself and also inside your client.
Yeah. Michelle, I just want to invite you, just jump in.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, because of coming to the model as a client and then as a practitioner, I really have that faith and trust in each system's unique unfolding, I guess, that's how I phrase it, is they're unfolding. And so really being open to listening to, and not even directly listening to, sometimes it's just really trusting that whichever part we're going to be meeting next or that's popping in at any point is there for a reason, that's a part of the bigger picture that we don't have to, you know at the very moment, right? So it's just really trusting in that, yeah, that there's a way to untangle the tangle of knots inside, and there's a wisdom in there. So there's the model, the protocol of the model, which we need, and that's a piece of it, I guess. And I think we see so much emphasis on that. And the other portion of the model is this being with and really trusting all that. And I think that's something you get with experience and over time. And yeah, our parts, our therapist parts, our managers can really get frustrated and maybe go back to something because, maybe something in your client has triggered you and your managers don't want to go there. So they're like, it's just going to be easier if we go back to whatever protocol we've done before. So I think I'm just saying yes to what you guys have both been saying. And
yeah, and
one metaphor. Oh,
go ahead.
One metaphor I've always had is, you know how magnets attract or repel? Mm-hmm. And for me, I've been seeing, I didn't necessarily have this with myself, but when I started seeing clients, seeing that there's this, and I think you've called it bone bruises, invisible bone bruises, but mm-hmm. I see it as magnets. As we start unburdening the parts, that magnetic force that is attracting from other people, mm-hmm. gets neutralized, or I guess it gets neutralized. So we no longer have that pull in to be triggered by something, mm-hmm. and that shifts everything.
Yeah, what I was going to add is, having said all that about not bailing, I do believe there are systems that can be helpful. Like I've had the experience of having clients that I was stuck with have a ketamine experience where they accessed a lot more self than I could with my client. And then they were able to find and work with a part that we had really struggled to get to. But the things I'm thinking about, and sometimes EMDR can be helpful that way too. And so there are certain models that are compatible with IFS and can sometimes expedite. But, for the people that I think do it right, they're still using IFS as the map of what it's about and what you're doing. And the expeditious technique is a temporary way to get around a stuck place. and then you come back to IFS. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that. I was just thinking about the notion of the self-correcting system. I really love that, because I think that in my mind, you know, as you were saying that, it's sort of like, what came up, I'll just tell you where my mind went. After level 3, I had a lot of backlash. So I did a demo with Dick, and I'd had a very, very deep experience with the group that were there, and had felt that there was some shifts inside. And then I did a demo, and I've been very stuck and had an unburdening with a part that, well, just seemed impossible. After a year of sort of working with a bunch of protectors around various this and other parts. But I came home and had a really big experience, terrifying big experience, where I had a bunch of protectors really frightened and melting down about things. And actually it was the biggest gift. I'm really grateful for the backlash, because what happened was sometimes my system can get so frightened about something that I go into kind of like a terror/panic state, what I call feels like what I call PTSD crisis, whatever you want to call it, activation into all that stuff for months and months and months. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I'm just beside myself. I can't settle it down. And it felt like that was beginning. And when that starts, I've never been able to pull it back before. And so I was just kind of holding in my mind when you were speaking that someone had said to me, as this was all starting to unfold, and I'd contacted Michelle and we'd had a bit of a session, and we got to know the parts that were involved that were doing it, and what the initial concern was, and then who was cascading to cause the extra layers. But then I spoke to a person who sort of said, look, you've just processed a big trauma. This is just a Kundalini awakening, you know, like, if you want to call it that. And that might not be my frame of reference, but I liked it, because I was talking to Michelle another time about what we might call spiritual emergence. And she said, it's just a really rapid unblending. It helped me reframe that a bit. So, okay, so I've had this unblending, parts are freaking out. And once I knew that, I was able to realize that, that I could be with this experience rather than being afraid of it.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And so basically after that, it's still rocky for a few days, but I just was so much more able to go like, right, okay, so I'm really getting all of these concerns. Sometimes it was jumbled and it took me a little while to work out who was who and pull it apart. But I got to a place after about 3 days where my parts, as long as I'm awake, I can manage. Going to sleep is a nightmare. They just wake me up in this panic state. And I woke up one night and they did this panic thing, and I just went, right, yep, got that. And what was beautiful is because I got it, everyone else who normally cascades just didn't, and I went back to sleep. And it was just like this incredible moment. And so I suppose for me, I just was relieved, because I feel much more safe in my body, my system, because I'm like, so even the most difficult kind of thing, where parts are doing their thing, now I can sort of trust a bit more. Whereas in the past, I was terrified of that space, that it would go on forever. Well, when it's going on, it feels like it'll be forever, but for months.
Yeah. So let me comment, because you're saying a number of important things here. So first, I'll say again, it really highlights what we're saying about that P word perspective. That again, these are delicate ecologies that we're playing with, and so systems thinking. You need to know that if you do one big piece, it's likely to have some kind of homeostatic system will have some kind of homeostatic backlash response. And then again, if that scares the client and then scares you as a therapist, and you bring in all the psychiatric reinforcements, then it just spirals down, as you've had those experiences for months. If instead therapists can stay in self, help the client stay in self, they give you the nightmare in the middle of the night, they say, well, she didn't go anywhere, she's still here with us. then they all calm down and they don't cascade in the way they ordinarily act, because there's a grown-up around. And so, yeah, it's just really important to have that ecological perspective that, yes, any of these major unburdenings is going to trigger the system to do something extreme in response, and to just stay self-led through the whole thing.
Yeah. Do you have any comments, Michelle?
No, I no, I don't think so. Not around that specific thing. I think that was well articulated.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments?
I was starting to kind of meander back to the notion of how, and I think this kind of just dovetails a little bit with how coming to learn IFS is not necessarily so much learning another protocol or learning another theory or something. It's more of that walking the talk, or or embodying the model. And I don't know why my brain was going that way, but something in maybe what you were sharing about your own experience of, I think maybe just your system's learning to understand and learning to trust in a different way, aside from the steps and protocol, maybe.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is, because I get a lot of questions from people who work with a lot of trauma, and they say things like, if you don't teach these skills to clients when they're not in your office, how are they going to regulate their affect? How are they going to handle themselves, until they are more self-led or something like that? And my answer is, it's sort of what you described, Stephanie, where in the past you would blend with these parts, and then no self would be available, and you would think of it pathologically, and then that would scare more parts, and then the fear would become a vicious cycle. And this time, instead, you thought, okay, these are scared parts. And I'm sure Michelle reinforced that. And what do they need from me? And I do find that survivors of horrible things can do that. They can notice, oh, it is a part that's blended with me. I might not be able to get it to stop, but I can see that that's all it is. And so I don't have to get so scared about it. And then just even that, just noticing it, and noticing it's a part that needs your help, even if you can't get it to separate, you don't have the same spiral.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like, and seeing each one. I think that was a gift to me, is seeing who was here. I remember Michelle said to me in the session that we had when it was all sort of starting to get difficult, there was a part that had some concerns, and then this part was giving me the sort of flooding me with what I call terror. It was pretty scary. And she's like, okay, well, let's go back to this first part. I'm like, why? This is the problem, this one. And she said, well, this one's doing it because of this one. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't even know that, So, yeah, something you said there made me think of that. But just, getting to know, really getting to know, and seeing who's here,
Exactly.
that's been the biggest gift, I think, over this is what I mean by that whole experience that was so difficult was a gift to me, because it's probably the first time I've seen just how much interplay there is between all the parts. And seeing that maybe in the past I've sort of known there's a few parts, but I haven't known who's who, and it's all jumbled, and it was really clear, like, okay, and from self, this is kind of like the clearest I felt self energy as well, maybe, is okay, I've got that concern, yep, great. And then there's the next one. Okay, great, I got that one too, I'm getting that. And then there's the next one, and it's like, okay, great, this isn't just a jumble any longer. This is, I'm hearing this part, and then I'm hearing this one, and this one, and this one. And so now I'm really, everyone's just settling down now because everyone feels heard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they kind of rush the gate and they're all chiming in, and you don't know who needs the attention the most,
Mm.
it's overwhelming and it's a mess. It's all confusing. But if you just take the time to say, okay, one at a time, let me hear you. And then how are you connected to this other one? And then who's the one that really needs the attention now?
Mm-hmm.
You'll often get down to the bottom of the chain and be able to calm everybody down.
Mm. Yeah, so I feel like we've gotten sidetracked talking about me.
It's really useful stuff. You know,
Great example.
yeah.
I am really curious, I suppose one of the things I do want to talk more about, I mean, we have so many topics that I'd love to cover in this series, and I know we're coming sort of close to the end of our time, but you know, to go just to go a little bit back to this what we sort of started talking about, not needing grounding techniques. And, you know, we've talked quite a bit about it just now. And I suppose I just really want to make sure. One of the things that I like to do, Dick, is I really like to sort of work out what does that look like? You know, how does it feel? What is it, you know, like, and I know this is a manager part and we're talking about self, but I still feel like, you know, how do we, it's almost, I know that meditation, people in meditation sort of say it's like you're trying to put language to something that's has no language. So I'm aware of that there's sort of like this thing here that we're trying to find language for, but I'm thinking, you know, like really how does a person come to the place of really embodying, knowing that the moment where they're using IFS? I mean, I know for me what's kind of been a shift, but I wonder what your perspective, or even Michelle, what each of you found, okay, that when you're sort of going, okay, I've tried a few things, this is like what's going on here, and do I need to go back to my old ways? You know, do I need to ground this person? It seems scary for me. What in that moment is the thing that is sort of like helpful for people to take away in slowing down in the model? So, you know, as I said, I've got my hypothesis, but I wonder what you might have to say.
Michelle or me?
Go ahead, Dick. I'm trying to formulate what I want to say.
Okay, well, mainly it's, and this is something that I spent a lot of time in, as you know, in level 3, which is to know when you, as a therapist, are in self and when you're not. And so I have what I call markers to check with, and particularly when I'm stuck with a client, I have a presumption that there may well be a part of me that's making us all stuck. And so I'll check my heart to see how open it is. I'll check, do I have a big agenda now? So those are 2 of 5 different things I'll check. And then I'll also notice how much of the C words do I have. And departures from any of that means there's a part in the way. And then I won't get to know it in the moment in the session, but I'll get it to step back, and then suddenly I don't have an agenda, and suddenly the client is more compliant. And so that's what I'm encouraging people to do, is really, really try your best to monitor your own system as a therapist. And where there are parts that consistently come up with different clients or the same client, take it as a serious trailhead and do your work with some therapist to find out what it's about, because it's not only getting in the way of your therapy, it's probably something really important for you to heal. And that becomes a practice. So when I go to do supervision now, it's very rare that I give anybody any kind of direct advice. Much more often, I just have them focus inside and find the parts that are in the way of them knowing what to do. And we work with those parts, they get out of the way, and now they suddenly know what to do with the client.
Great.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I would have said. Although I think for me, one thing I began doing early on when I became a practitioner was, and because I've had a daily meditation with my parts, before I start my day with clients, I let them know who I'm seeing for the day, and it's that they get the time in my morning meditation to tell me if they have something they want me to know about the client, or if anything concerns them, so that I get that all up front, and then they're off doing whatever they do for my day, and then I'm with clients, and so I'm really able to be there fully present with them. So, and when there is a part that does get activated, you know, it's just exactly what Dick says, learning who's there and taking your trailhead outside of it.
So I want to finish, because we have to finish soon. I want to finish with a fun story. I checked with this person whether I could share this. And I just love this story because I think one of the things that when I'm teaching, we always hear, I'm not talking about teaching IFS, so I teach around the country and working with psychosis and various things, and working with borderline and things. And basically I hear people sort of say, oh, but you don't understand my client, or Dick can do that. You know, like if we look at this, you know, Dick could do that because whose Dick is or whatever. And I suppose I've got a little example of something that happened to me. I'd just come back from Italy, and, you know, I'm pretty new to the model. And I had a phone call. So I used to run a trauma group, and now one of the other therapists in our clinic runs it. And I got a phone call one night from the therapist who's running it saying, we've got someone here who's really, really triggered. She's having a difficult time. Normally when she gets triggered like this, she gets so dissociated, she sort of puts herself, well, parts put her into very unsafe situations, and she ends up being detained and hospitalized in a psychiatric ward. So there was a lot of pressure and kind of like concern that if, you know, we didn't help her, you know, feel more grounded and stop dissociating, that it was going to go bad. And so I've never met this woman, and I didn't know how it was going to go. It was like a kind of, I mean, I wasn't thinking at the time, this is a test of the model, but I thought afterwards, wowzers, you know. So I really just asked her, like, what was going on. And it's something had gotten triggered. They were talking that night about boundaries, and she brought up, something had come up for her about the boundaries around when she was violated as a child. And so this was what was going on. And then there was the part who was, so the exile was flooding her with something, and then the protector was trying to shut her down. And just in the process of, I mean, I can't really remember exactly what I did, other than we helped I said, we're not doing, you know, like I kind of made it pretty clear, we're not doing a counselling session, we're just going to help everyone settle down. And a little bit of self-to-part relationship with the protector and the exile. And the protector gave enough space to really just ask the exile to stop flooding. So we kind of got to that. And then I said to the exile, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't keep doing this? And she said, you know, like, you're going to forget me. And there was this moment, because I don't know this woman, okay? I'm going, I have no idea how much self-energy is going to be available in this moment. And I said, well, what do you want to say? And I felt like I was going out on a limb, you know, like, how do you want to respond to this woman, to this part? And she said, wow, I've only just got to know her. I don't want to forget her. And I was like, magic. And so I was like, great. So they made this agreement. She wasn't going to flood. She just felt so much better. The protector felt, you know, great. She went home. She takes public transport to the group. And so the group leader had actually driven her home. And she said, the group leader was like, she's just chatting the whole way home. And I spoke to her afterwards when I said, can I share your story here? And I said, did you find that helpful? You know, we're not spoken since. I had no idea. You know, I thought she could have been in hospital the next day for all I knew. And she said, no, that was so, so helpful to me. And that's the first time that that's ever happened, that I haven't ended up in hospital.
That's right.
Yeah. So
it's all it takes. And to do it, you have to have this different paradigm that says, you know, the reason the exile is trying to overwhelm is because it's rightfully afraid that if it doesn't totally take over, it'll be locked up again.
Yeah.
And once you kind of get that, then you can negotiate with it.
Yeah.
It's a very small shift, really, but it makes all the difference in terms of these kind of psychiatric emergencies.
Yeah. So I thought it was a fun example of kind of debunking the idea that you can sort of do that with some people and not others. So.
Yeah, totally. It's a great example.
So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to more conversations. I feel like we've got a list of things, well, I have a list of what we might want to cover, and so maybe we can see where we go from here.
Happy to do it. Glad you're doing it for the community. Thanks, Stephanie.
No worries.
Great to see you, Phil.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.